Today finds me on section 12 of the New England Trail. This is in south central Connecticut. We're straddling the border between the towns of Meriden, Berlin, and Middletown, I believe. So this section starts a couple miles northbound from here. If you started on the north end of section 12, you'd be on the other side of Interstate 91 with some road walking. So I'm starting where that sign I just recorded is, Wesleyan Woods Park, which has that little sign and a little bit of a gravelly area you can park at. It's actually a road that goes back to a quarry, but there was room to park there, so I did. So we're going to head southbound on section 12. We're going to skip the first couple miles. We're going to do about 5 miles southbound from Country Club Road down to Connecticut Route 66. And we're going to be going up and over Mount Higby, which is almost 900 feet high. It has 2 summits. The first summit is the highest one, and that's about 890 feet high. You go down into a saddle and then back up to the second summit. It's about 830 feet high. I've only done a little bit of the south summit once. I didn't have a lot of time that day. That was a long time ago. But there's lots of cliffs and lots of views and lots of rocks. So we'll be out here all day. We got about 7 hours of daylight right now. That should be enough to do this. If I get slowed down, I can always just do out and back. But I'm going to try to make a loop hike where I do this whole section and then do some road walking to get back to my car. But this is blue blazed here, and you do see New England Trail symbols occasionally along this trail, but you're following the blue blazes of the Metacomet and Mattabesett trails through this area. We're going to be following some old wood roads here for a mile or two, and then ascending the north side of Mount Higby. There's some points of interest on that north side I'm going to be looking for. If we can find them, I'll point them out. Well, open woods are what you see as you walk southbound on the New England Trail from Country Club Road. It's just slightly uphill. I'm not sure if any of this part of the trail is going to be steep, but I know there's steep sections up on Mount Higby. And open woods, you really don't need a trail. You could walk through these woods with no trouble till you get to the cliffs at least, or mountain laurel patches, but none of that so far, just blue blazes for about a half a mile. And then there's a well-advertised turn in the trail here, where the blue blazed Mattabesett Trail. This is the New England Trail through Connecticut. It follows the Mattabesett and the Metacomet trails. The name changes when you cross Berlin Turnpike Route 5, about 10 miles north of here. Part of that section on Lamentation Mountain is closed right now for fire problems. Unfortunately, there was a pretty large fire there last week that's still being contained or monitored for spread. But this section is open and there's no fires on this mountain right now, but it is very dry right now. So mud is not a problem, but I've read that this section of trail can get a little muddy during wetter times of year, but it's dry right now. So this double blaze here is for a right-hand turn that starts going uphill more. The blue and red is a side trail that goes over to Tynan Park, T-Y-N-A-N, which is another way to access Mount Higby from the north. I've also read that that gets muddy and has some briar issues. We may end up looping back that way if we can get that far. We'll see how the time goes today. But if I do make a loop on roads to get back from Route 66, I may take this to avoid part of the road walking. So this is a spur trail. It goes about a mile east from here to Tynan Park. You could access it from there. You can also access it from Route 66 coming north. But I chose to come from the north and head southbound to see parts of Mount Higby I'd never seen before, and also maybe to avoid crowds, because there's a lot of cars parked on Route 66 to hike this section of trail most days. Well, we were hiking gradually uphill most of the time, maybe 1.5 miles, 2 miles, on the Blue Blaze Mattabesset Trail, and gradually gaining elevation here. Now we're going to make a turn to the south, and we're right near the top of this. It's geologically, this is a hogback. But one side of the mountain is gently sloped and the other side is steeply sloped. In this case, it's mostly just cliffs of differing heights to our west. So we've come up the gradual side of this tipped layer of rock, which is called basalt, and the steep side is to our west, and we'll get some views in just a minute. That was just one of the many lookouts we're going to get today. We won't record them all. Take a look at this one real quick though. You can see that large quarry to our west. And the trail actually goes right near the top of that. It weaves around through this valley. It's still the Mattabesset Trail when it's over what's called Chauncey Peak. Shortly after that, it goes over Lamentation Mountain, and when it comes down off Lamentation Mountain and crosses Route 5, the New England Trail is also called the Metacomet Trail and not the Mattabesset Trail. Well, these are open woods. I've got an off-trail destination we're going to go check out if we can find it, and then we'll keep going over the top of Mount Higby. We're almost at the top right now as far as climbing goes. We'll keep recording the views as they unfold. These are open woods, so easy to go off-trail hiking, especially in the fall when ticks are less of a problem, snakes are less of a problem, and briars are less of a problem. Well, this open woods on the north side of Mount Higby, northeast side is what we've been climbing, makes it easy to go off-trail. And I have come off-trail. When I was researching this hike, I did a little looking online for Mount Higby, and there's some historical interest on this northeast slope, one of which I found because other YouTubers have been up here and recorded it. Otherwise, I don't know if I would have realized this was an overhang here that was used by the Leatherman. I'm zoomed in on a photo of the Leatherman from 1857 to 1889. So for 32 years, the Leatherman, and he didn't have a name that anybody knew. He was a very shy person. He was one of the original through hikers, if you look at it that way. He was doing a 365-mile loop through Connecticut and New York. And he showed up at his points of resupply, if you want to call that, every 34 days. There's a lot of information about the Leatherman and some photos of him. And his clothing was made of leather, and he would repair it and obtain leather along the route that he took, and sleep where he could, including this overhang here, which is big enough for one person, maybe two. And yes, there's just enough overhang here to keep you dry, but boy, this is facing north. I don't know how warm it would be, but it looks fairly level, and I would expect that the person whose name we never knew removed some of these rocks and maybe piled them up right here. Let's just sneak on in here and take a look at the geology here. It's pretty interesting. You can see the orangish color, this basalt, which I've commented on many of my adventures, is volcanic in origin. It doesn't come out of a volcano like you'd see like Mount St. Helens or Mount Hood, but it oozes out slowly through cracks in the earth and covers large areas. The basalt layer that we're hiking on today goes for miles and miles above ground from basically Long Island Sound up into Massachusetts, and it continues underground where you can't see it for 10-15 miles in either direction. So a lot of iron in the minerals of basalt, so it tends to rust into this beautiful orange color. Sometimes it breaks into nice even prisms that are hexagonal or pentagonal in shape. I don't see a lot of that right here. It's just kind of angular, but there's no pentagons or hexagons. We'll keep a lookout for them. And just above this layer of basalt here, this is called the Holyoke Formation, is a layer of sandstone and shale. Geologically it's above it, but it's downhill from here because of the way the rock layers are tipped. But after this layer of basalt was deposited, the sandstone and shale was deposited on top of it, and there's dinosaur footprints in that layer, at least in parts of that layer. It's called the East Berlin Formation. And just north of here in Rocky Hill, Connecticut, there's a beautiful museum with the prints well preserved. And just down the mountain from here, maybe 2 or 3 miles by straight line, would be Powder Hill Dinosaur Park, where I recorded my tracking dinosaurs along the Connecticut River video. I recorded that about a month ago. So wouldn't expect to find footprints up here unless we get off this layer of rock into the one that's geologically above it. But this is about big enough for one person here. It's about less than 2/10 of a mile off the trail. I'll make a compass bearing from the trail towards this and make note of that in just a few minutes here. But you know, it feels a lot warmer in here than it does outside, so maybe this was adequate for a gentleman that was dressed in a heavy suit of leather and probably had some other ways of keeping warm as well. Okay, so to find Leatherman's cave, and this is one of many caves that he used, but this is supposedly one of them, and he did his circuit many times through the 32 years. And as time went on, he became, you know, somewhat famous. So people kind of figured out where he was staying. They would maybe follow him from a distance, or, you know, retrace his steps in the snow. But there's a lot of faded blazes on this trail that may not be here if you want to try to relocate this cave. So I am counting plastic blazes, the ones that are nailed to the trees. And we're at the third one right here. We've come up just a little bit of a steep hill. We've passed 2 overlooks that were obvious. And when you get to this third blaze, if you bring a compass and set it for 140 degrees magnetic, so you don't have to set declination to get to the Leatherman's cave. The way I did it was without setting declination. Honestly, I didn't have a printed topo map to get the declination from. There's our plastic blaze. That's the third one from where the trail came up out of the northeast slope and made a double blaze turn to the south. So I recorded that a few minutes ago. I recorded a couple overlooks. You do a little bit of a steep climb here. This is the second steep climb from that point where you reach this ridge. From right here, if you set 140 degrees magnetic bearing and follow these rocks that are over here, stay below these rocks. So you got a natural opening, and you got just different places where there's ledges, and then there's a break, and then there's more ledges. So if you stay below these ledges, there's one right here, a little hard to see with being backlit. If you go 140 degrees, which is basically this direction, and stay just below those ledges, and if you go less than 2/10 of a mile, you can find that cave. You saw what it looked like in my video. If you Google Mount Higby Leatherman's Cave, it'll give you the precise coordinates, GPS coordinates. It also pinpointed on the map, and that's how I found it. I used their map and printed off my topo sheet, and then took the information for their map and put it on mine, and then I actually came in from a different direction to save myself some time. But I just retraced the route that I would have taken if I were hiking this trail to the third plastic blaze on this ridge line, and proceeded east-southeast at 140 degrees, and within a few minutes you can find it. From the cave, it only took me 5 minutes to walk back here, but I did locate it from a different direction just to save myself a little time. I took a shortcut. There's also the remnants of a plane crash up here, and they're supposed to be near the cave. I didn't go looking for them because I kind of consider that sacred. I'm not going to go looking for that. It's a tragedy. It happened in 1954, I think, and there's another plane crash in 1966 on the other side of the mountain that's still there. So my personal philosophy is just leave it alone. But it's supposed to be right near that cave. I may have stumbled on it if I was looking harder, but I didn't go looking for it. But it is back there, and there's information on that and the GPS coordinates for that as well. Let's continue on to the summit of Mount Higby. Boy, these woods are so pretty. It's all either grass or hickory trees up here. I don't think there's even one oak. A few birches. And that's about all. So people that have hiked this in the summer recorded it, and the grass is very green. It looks pretty neat. Of course, it's all brown now, partly because of the dryness the last few months and partly because of the time of year. But this view just continues on and on. I'm going to keep getting different views as we go here. Comment anything we see, plants wise or animals wise, geology wise. We'll just keep hiking. This summit goes on for a distance. This is the summit somewhere in here. I haven't seen a benchmark yet, but we'll keep recording the views. We'll go down in a saddle, and then we got to go up the second summit, which is slightly lower. And yes, that's Interstate 91 right below us here. And West Peak and Castle Craig is to our west. That's where I did the introduction to the New England Trail last year at this time. And right back here, we're going to turn around. I noticed it on one of the maps that I didn't print off. There was a place called Tunnel Rock. I'm not sure if this is it or not, but certainly could be. And you know, it would keep you dry, but I don't know if the Leatherman could have slept underneath this thing. It's pretty rocky. But right here, underneath this rock here, is a little bit of a, almost like a natural bridge, where this block of basalt is broke. It's basically got cracks on either side, and then a natural tunnel underneath it. So it's not much you could do to sleep under that. It probably would keep you dry, but I don't know about sleeping. So the spot we looked at a few minutes ago was probably the better choice. But I'm sure there's more places like that up on this mountain. And shortly after Tunnel Rock, we're going to get a view more to the south now. Looks like this is more open than where we were a few minutes ago. So yes, Interstate 91 does, you know, it takes up some of the solitude up here. You can hear it a lot of the time, and you can certainly see it from any of these views. But that aside, we do have some great views. So we'll start with West Peak, due west from here. I'll zoom in on Castle Craig. Which is right there, that little nub on the side of West Peak. And we'll pan to the south towards the city of Meriden underneath it. Interstate 91. And the sleeping giant doesn't look so much like a giant from this direction. But it's right there. You can't really see the giant's head from this perspective, but those little nubs there, that's the sleeping giant, looking more from a easterly direction, northeasterly direction. And I think we can see New Haven Harbor if we go just a little further down this lookout. And that's the skyline of New Haven there. And I can see clearly Long Island Sound in the North Shore of Long Island. But that's pushing the limits of this camera. There's New Haven. I think it's coming out okay. And Long Island Sound, and then a few miles south of that is the North Shore of Long Island, maybe 15-20 miles wide, the Long Island Sound at that point. Well, what a great place to hike. We've got to get some miles behind us. I've been doing a lot of looking lately, not a lot of moving, so we'll start recording again shortly when we find more lookouts and more points of interest. We're slowly descending the main summit of Mount Higby to a saddle that's about 300 feet lower than the summit, but probably 300 feet higher than Interstate 91. And then we'll start going up again to the second summit, which is just slightly lower than the first one. This is the one a lot of people that start at Route 66 day hike to. It's got great views as well for half the effort. And you can see it in the background there behind the trees. So we're heading downhill, and the cliffs are kind of backlit right now, but they're there, and they're very large. So we'll see if we can get a good look at those when we're up there. What a pretty day to be out here. It was in the low 30s this morning, but it's mid 50s now, and with this sun it feels very nice. Makes a big difference. There's another landmark I'm going to show you. It's within sight of the trail. We started on Country Club Road right near I-91. So the New England Trail from the north crosses 91 on Country Club Road, and then we continued into the woods, gradually ascending. We met the red and blue trail. It comes in from Tynan Park. Just took our time going up the mountain. Never got steep. And then right in here is where we started counting those plastic blazes from that gap there where you came up out of the valley and started heading south along the edge of the cliff. I've got circled. The star is where the Leatherman's cave is supposed to be, and I found that just south of that is supposed to be where the plane crash is. And then we went over the summit of Mount Higby at 892 feet, came down into Preston's Notch, which we just came through, and now there's a little nub here called Camel's Hump. Put my thumb on it there. 4 or 5 10-foot contour lines define it, so let's go check it out, and then we'll head up to the south summit of Mount Higby. So yes, as you're heading south, there's blue blazes, and just to your right, left, if you're heading south, there's an obvious ledge here. It's in the place where the Camel's Hump is defined on the map. So I see more overhangs here. I don't know if these could have been Leatherman's cave as well, or could have been a cave that he used. Let's go check them out. So yes, this does have an overhang, but it isn't very smooth. Just like that tunnel rock. Good place to stay dry, not a good place to lay down. This one probably could have been excavated to make it a little better, but again, he did this circuit through Connecticut and New York for many, many years. So people figured out where he was staying. And this is not supposed to be one of them. But you can see there's enough overhang here. Definitely enough overhang here that you could lay down and not get wet, but it's pretty stony under here, and you know, you'd have to do a lot of excavating to get it better. So the one we found earlier looks like it would be the better choice. If you can't find that one, this one's within sight of the trail, and it looks a lot like it. Just if you're curious and don't want to go off trail or don't have time or can't find it. Has similar rocks with the rusty color and that jagged appearance. So this is the overhang underneath the Camel's Hump. Okay, I think we're getting near the second summit of Mount Higby, and we're starting to get some great views as well. Looking to the south like we did from the first summit. 91 is a little further away now, so it's not quite so loud. And then there's the main summit, the one that's highest of Mount Higby to our north. Maybe a 10-minute walk uphill from Camel's Hump, not even that if you move fast. So the saddle is pretty close to the summit. You don't have much climbing. I just showed the scrambling, and that was about the extent of it. So there's Mount Higby. Way to the north, but the same layer of rock. Is Mount Tom. A little hazy today, but I think we can see that almost a pyramid shape. It's just slightly steeper on the west side than on the east side. That may be a place I might explore on the New England Trail sometime too. Certainly within day trip distance for me. Most of the New England Trail is within day trip distance for me, so that's why I decided to start documenting it, because I can get to it without taking any extended time off. I can day hike it all the way up to the New Hampshire border by Royalston Falls. So these are great views up here, and we'll keep recording what we can see as the afternoon goes on. Well, this second half of Mount Higby, as you're coming from the north to south, has the most expansive views, and it goes on for probably at least a quarter to a half a mile of continuous cliff line with just a few breaks without a view, and then you're right back to this wide open cliff line. So slightly lower in elevation, but incredible views. The works of man are constantly in your face with these power lines and interstates, but it's still amazing. Got a pretty good view of New Haven Harbor right now. It's reflecting the sun, so it stands out real clearly. We'll get that in just a second here. I think we're done most of the ridge walking here. One plant that's been our companion for quite a distance on this second summit, and we saw it last year in the Hanging Hills near Castle Craig. Along all the cliff lines there is this bearberry, which needs full sun and grows in more northerly climates. It's kind of near the southern end of its range here. So let's just take one last look at the views before we start scrambling down Mount Higby towards Route 66. And I made good enough time lately. I'm going to keep walking and make a loop back to the starting point just to keep me from backtracking, and also to make sure I get in plenty of steps today. The days I have time to hike, I like to get in at least 8 or 9 miles, because the other days of the week I don't have time to do that kind of distance. So let's take one last look at the view here. You can see the stress cracks in this basalt here. As the basalt cools, it cracks. Remember, it comes out of the ground molten, and then sometimes cools very quickly. And those stress cracks can form these large slabs that break off. Make for great building rock. It breaks in nice angular pieces that pack together well. When a rock cools very quickly, it shrinks and cracks form, and then other minerals will accumulate in those cracks to create these little ridges. Those ridges are minerals that are slightly less resistant or more resistant to erosion than the basalt itself. So you see these little ridges. Take one last look at our view, and down we're going to go. Straight south of here is called Bisek Mountain, and just a little bit of Black Pond is in view. That's a place that's on my to explore list. The view from Black Pond up at Bisek Mountain is amazing. You can really see the layers of rock clearly. So I might be trying that sometime soon. And then straight south, the brightness you see in the center of your screen is New Haven Harbor and Long Island Sound. And then looking back north towards the quarry that we saw a few hours ago. We'll keep walking down Higby Mountain. We're going to do some road walking. I probably won't record much of that. And then see what we can see once we get back in the woods. I'm probably going to cut over that red and blue trail from Tynan Park back to the trail where we started. Unless it's getting dark, then I might have to continue walking the road. But I think I have enough time. So we'll certainly wrap this up before then and summarize everything, including getting out the trail map one more time. What a great hike. If you don't have time to do everything I did today, I've probably come about 4 miles, 3 to 4 miles from Country Club Road. You can come in from Route 66. A lot of people do, and it's, you know, a half-hour hike to get to this first summit, which has the most scenic rewards for your time. And we were able to make the loop that I planned that had about 2 miles of road walking. And this shows everything we did today. We started up here at Country Club Road, came down the blue trail to where the blue and red joined it. Followed the blue trail up over Mount Higby, 892 feet. Leatherman's cave was right about there. And then followed the ridge down into the gap between Mount Higby and the south summit. Looked at the Camel's Hump, and then came all the way down to the south summit with all the views. And then we had that nice view of Black Pond. I didn't talk, but I showed it. There's a spur trail down to a good parking lot that most people take, but I stayed on the blue trail, which parallels 66, but it's back in the woods. And then 2 miles of road walking. 66 is busy, but it's got a nice wide shoulder. This Higby Road, it's got some traffic, doesn't have much shoulder, but the sight lines are pretty good for the 3/4 mile back up to Tynan Park. Now we're going to take the blue and red trail back to the Tynan Park Junction and then back up to Country Club Road. I was figuring it'd be longer, but I just did the math and it looks like 7.6 miles total. Some of the information I got from the New England Trail Association indicated it was longer than that. But this is the New England Trail. This is the only place I've seen a sign saying the New England Trail and not just the Mattabesett Trail. Alrighty, well that blue and red trail has been well maintained this fall. The briars, the multiflora rose, and raspberries have been cut back, but I can tell you there are trail reviews that indicate otherwise. So Connecticut Forest and Park Association does a great job maintaining their trails, but they can't be everywhere at once. So I would guess that later in the season, after they've gotten through to clear it, would be the best time, but I had no trouble today. Once you come down about a third of a mile on the blue and red trail, it goes back into the woods. And we've got a stream bed here that's dry from the lack of rain, but a great place to look at a little bit more geology. That Mount Higby is about 800 feet thick. The rock that's there is about 800 feet thick, and it's lava that came out. And some things can happen when lava comes out and cools down. We saw the stress cracks up on top of the mountain towards the end of that section. That's when the basically the rock contracts as it cools. Another thing that can happen with the lava as it comes out is because of the loss of pressure, the gases that were in the lava will start to form bubbles, and sometimes they will leave holes in the rock. It's pretty common to find this near the top and bottom of these lava flows. So we're geologically near the top of it right here, even though we're lower than the summit of Higby Mountain. We're down in the creek. The rock dips this way, so we're actually near the top of it. And just a few hundred feet to my east, we're into the layers that might have the dinosaur footprints, but I'm not going to have time to go down there and even look. I doubt that I'd find any in the stream bed, but that's where I would look if I were looking. But this was obvious. I'm taking a little break here. These bubbles are up to a ½ inch wide. Sometimes they fill with minerals after they've formed. So to demonstrate how this works, this carbonated water is the seltzer water. The carbon dioxide has been, the soda has been pressurized, so the carbon dioxide will stay in the water under the current pressure inside this bottle. Just like when these rocks, before they come to the surface, the gases will stay in the rocks and not form bubbles. Watch what happens when I take the lid off this. All those bubbles start coming to the surface. Matter of fact, I made a mistake. I assumed it hadn't got shook up in my pack all day. That was a bad assumption, but you can see those bubbles coming to the surface. So when the rock is under pressure and the soda is under pressure, the gases stay dissolved, but as soon as the pressure is released, as this rock comes to the surface, the deal goes down and the bubbles start to form, and they become basically fossilized bubbles. And the lava, when it comes out, when it doesn't form the bubble, sometimes it can get these stress cracks that we saw on the summit of Mount Higby. Here's lava without stress cracks. This is a Cadbury candy bar. But as it cools, basically the rock contracts and cracks form between these blocks. So as it cools, spaces form between these blocks, and we could see those ridges of other minerals. Most of it looked like iron on the summit of Mount Higby, but in this case they're actually cracks. But pretend those filled in with another mineral, and that would be what happens when the rock cools down but doesn't have the bubbles form in it. So two different things happen in the lava depending on where it comes out and what the conditions are like. It's fascinating geology back here. We're going to keep walking back the blue and red trail and get back on the section of the blue trail, the Mattabesset Trail, back up the Country Club Road that we walked this morning.